so moist.
Hey everybody, welcome to Functional Meatheads. I'm Mark DeSalvo.
Hey everybody. I'm Philip.
Everybody.
What's up? Where's that from? Hey everybody.
Hey
Yeah.
everybody. I mean, there's Tally on South Park. There's a lot of hey everybody's.
Hey everybody.
Oh, no, man.
Anyways, I wonder who said it first. I always wonder who said it first.
That's a good question. I don't know, but it's a great way to start a show. Well, welcome to Functional Meatheads, everyone. I don't know if we introduced ourselves, but I am Mark DeSalvo,
I am Froilan Sanchez.
and we have some cool stuff to talk about today.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with it's kind of one of those manifesto podcasts, those philosophy ones where we sort of talk about it's something we kind of talk about every time, but it gets you into the inner workings of our brain and how we think about all of these different things. But
We won't talk about the NFL today. Promise.
yeah, no NFL. But yeah. We had a good warm up before the show. Warming up before the show is important. Or else you're coming crazy cold. So anyway, what you got any projects for you?
Any projects this week? No, nothing very specific. The weather change is very interesting on my body. I'm noticing I'm a little bit more tired as soon as the weather started getting cooler, like along the same lines, and that's pretty new for me because I guess I've never been in tune with like the seasons changing and being healthy. You know, it's almost like all that hormonal stuff that goes on and on a subtle level when seasons change. I'm in tune with it and I'm down with it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as the heat let up, I started getting deeper sleep, eating better because it coincided with the Walls type GAP diet, so everything was a little bit more in tune on a cellular level. Weird doing the Walls and the GAP, kind of like following that on a very strict basis and kind of paying attention more to what I eat. And meditating more. I feel, and it's probably psychosomatic, but the Walls diet claims to like really how am I going to get your cells to function optimally? How am I going to? I want to fuel your cells on an individual level, and It's almost like now that I meditate on that, I almost feel like you feel that working. It's so weird, like your whole there's feeling good physically, right? Like okay, I'm mobile, and you kind of feel that, and then there's meditating and feeling good, kind of meditating, and then there's having a good meal that strikes you right. Imagine and drinking water. Imagine putting all that together in one solid line back to back to back. That's kind of what's happening now, and it's probably psychosomatic just because the language of the cells and everything. But I feel really good these days, and I feel like my meditations are at a better level. I feel like my sleep's at a better level. I feel everything's firing on a better level, and I almost feel it they say earthing or walking on the grass and everything. You feel it better.
Yeah.
I feel it, and I wish this is one of the ones. This is the feeling that you're like, God, I wish I could just snap my fingers and you could feel this for 15 minutes, and then you wouldn't touch a Big Mac. You'd be like, wow, this is what it feels like. It's very high. It's a good body high on different levels.
Yeah, I mean, you might call it psychosomatic, or you might call it it's almost like taking a second to be mindful of the things you do and why you do it. So, you can almost get a deeper understanding of why you might do a certain thing, why you might sleep this much and eat these types of foods and not eat these ones, and try to match it with science in your head. But then you're also doing it while meditating, so it's like you're giving thanks. It's that whole Sankalpa Yoga Nidra type of thing. It's almost like you're acknowledging the things you're doing to help yourself.
It feels like a psychedelic trip, almost like I'm on a ride. I'm on a ride as my ego, like my mind, my active mind's on a ride, but the body's on a different trip because it's a physical, more of a physical high that my body's on, that my cells are on. It's very kind of in the ether, but it's one of those things that you can describe almost like when I felt good when I was meditating for 40 days, that little program that I did that puts me, like Rogan was talking about, like his buddy who does Kundalini, that's exactly what I did. I did it for 40 days straight, and I was on a way, really deep high. Um, so it's something that I want to kind of do that. That's my next phase, to get back into that program, that 40-day. I was able to do it when I wasn't working, but now I have to, it's hard to find an hour, almost 2 hours, because you got to do the program and then you got to meditate for a half hour. So it's carving 2 hours out after work. I wish I could do it at my gym, but they play music too much, so it's I can't.
Yeah, that's difficult. That's a benefit. It's crazy. Like training more now in a place that there's just no music. God, it makes such a difference.
I know, dude. Trust me. In my next life, I'm gonna create a temple of just. Funny thing is, I think even Jim Jones, they have music blasting like crazy.
I think you can use it. I think you can use it as part of an experience, but I think when you're doing certain types of things, and basically, if you were to make a blanket statement, just don't turn it on at all. But like, if you wanted to use it as a tool to like jack up an athlete or something, or get like hyper focused for maybe a minute, I could see using it. That's like how DeFranco's written about that before, about
It's
how
a,
he uses it.
it's a tool though. It's no
Yeah, it's no different than like a BCAA
workout.
powder or something.
It's always been very, very. Working out has been always been very private to me. It's like religion, and I don't
Yeah.
mean to demean any other religions, but it's always been like, okay, now it's my time to go do this. Are
Right.
you there?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm here. Sorry, I was pouring myself some water.
It's always been more of like a
Take a
private,
swig of water for the working man.
stone cold. Sounds like it's a very private thing for me, and so I'm a runner, so I'd go run 12 miles with no music, just go out and do it and zone in. So working out's the same for me, but I understand people that need the music and want the music and use the music, but it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. How about you? What are your projects?
Well, as a continuation of kind of what I was talking about last week, trying to heal from this rib injury, this jujitsu related rib injury, I definitely sounded probably when I went back and I was kind of putting together the podcast to put on iTunes and whatnot. I definitely noticed some depression in me, and I can also think about that too. Is like, um, in short, it's basically a continuation of week 2 of basically on a very low inflammation diet to try to help promote uh, the healing of what I think is a rib cartilage injury. Uh, is this diagnosed as a strain by my doctor, but I think that based on where I was researching where the pain is, looking at the anatomy charts, looking as that you can strain it, I looks like it was a cartilage strain in the ribs, the lowest attached rib to the sternum, so your 10th rib, I believe it is. So anyway, like when you're someone like me who most of your hobbies kind of revolve around moving around, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be like frantically or like expending huge amounts of energy, but when you like to go for walks or just casual bike rides, and then all of a sudden you can't, it is kind of weird on your psyche a little bit. So like to make a long story short, when I was listening to the podcast last week, or sections of it, I was like, wow, I sounded depressed, and I definitely felt it. So, but the one thing I can say though is that when you're on a GAPS type protocol diet, especially when you do like when you go by that protocol with the bone broth that Frost talked about, which is basically just beef stock, um, homemade, uh, and you're just eating vegetables and meat and fats and whatnot, and you're avoiding, like, if you want to go real extreme, like me too, you even avoid grains, like even things that are seemingly harmless, like rice. It has made a big difference. It has done a lot for maybe, I don't know if it's a chicken or an egg situation where I'm getting more peace from maybe not eating a certain way, or maybe I've just come to peace with the fact that I'm on the DL for a month. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a mental acceptance or if it's has to do with what I'm consuming or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, I I'm feeling better. I mean, I'm definitely on the mend. I'm at the end of this injury. This is like week 4 or 5 of it, and I've had 2 pain-free days now. Like no symptoms at all.
That's
And
good.
Yeah, and that's great. And I want to string together a few more before I think about even doing anything. But
Agreed. Even
yeah,
band work.
what's that?
Agreed. Even band work.
Yeah, well, band work is my stupid way of also saying too all things that aren't really working out.
It's
You know
just
what's weird though?
I think it's your nervous system though. Like you're I think coming back from this is like, and you've already have a plan. You've already told me your plan. You're gonna do it right. You're gonna get everything firing back normal before you go back. But I think that's gonna be to me, that's gonna be the biggest thing that you're gonna have to overcome. And I don't mean it like it's impossible. You're gonna have to be spot on with your form and make sure your body doesn't have these little ticks and moves that it got during the injury to like avoid the rotation and avoid the movement and avoid injuring that area.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're not going to notice it until you actually start sparring, rolling again. So it's going to be that's going to be the final test, you know. But it's going to be interesting on your part to come up with a program that's going to be all right. Let me get solid and let me go from here in 4 weeks from A to Z. You know, it's going to be a good challenge, but it's going to help you. Like I said, every injury has helped me. It sucks. It sucks the worst. It's the worst thing in the world. I've been out for 6 months from playing soccer. That was the worst, and I was definitely depressed. But not even on a physical level. I'm pretty sure the body, when it's healing, and it takes up a lot of energy to heal something, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with all your other regular stresses in life, and then your body's healing, and that's a very, you know how it is when you have a full day of, let's say you're training all these clients, and they're necessarily not necessarily clients you can run through a wall. They're like long healing sessions where you're just doing PT stuff and fixing stuff. Just as a trainer doing that, that takes a lot more energy than hey, go work out of the day. WOD. Here's your WOD. You know.
Right.
So I can only imagine. And we really, as trainers and athletes, we don't really think of it ourselves. Like, oh man, like if this is how tired I get this doing for somebody else, imagine when it's time for me to do it for myself.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the other parts that's been really difficult about uh, about this is that it's not so much. It's kind of like you said, like physically I don't have feel the need to move because I know I'm healing, like I don't have like a nervous energy about myself like I gotta go for a run or I gotta go for a bike ride or I need to be at jujitsu. It's more of like my body and my mind are kind of at peace with that, like you're healing right now. But the only thing that like makes me nervous with my body is that I've done so much postural work over the years and have done so much to just correct problems I used to have, forward shoulders, forward head, all these things like that. That and it took a long time to create these habits of doing certain. I hesitate to call them exercises, but they kind of are things that help correct it. Just protocols.
Yeah.
And I haven't been doing them because I can't really. I just kind of shut everything down.
Hmm.
And I have a nervousness, or I can't tell if it's a nervousness or it actually is like I do feel certain things like reverting slowly. It's like not like I'm gonna go back to being this bunched up mess, but
Hmm.
um, I also understand my injury. I also understand rib injuries have a lot of referred pain to the thoracic region of your spine because of the fact that you're not breathing so deeply by default, and you have to be a lot more conscious of these things. So I get why I have certain pains elsewhere, but there's certain things in my neck, rear delts, like shoulders, things that I'm very nervous about not doing much more of. So when I said to you before I want to do band stuff, a lot of my band work is all just the DeFranco stuff, scarecrows, pulling outwards, just doing things to fire the lats to keep your shoulder girdle like where it's supposed to be. Not doing those now for almost 5 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. That makes me a little nervous, rightly or wrongly.
I wonder if sitting, how the effect of just sitting on an injury, like, because that's a rib injury, and most people don't sit straight anyways. You
Yeah.
know, you do
I've
have to sit.
Yeah, I've been very cognizant of how I'm sitting, but even sitting is still sitting. Like I'll do my best to stand a lot, but even that got fatiguing. And that's how I knew I was injured, is that standing up got fatiguing. And
Huh.
that's something that never was necessarily the case. So, I've been as careful as one can be who might have to sit a lot or stand, whatever it is.
And
It
no,
just
I think you're doing the right thing. Okay, just like health is a journey, so is having an injury. Like you get the injury, then you're pretty much in denial about it, and you try to shake it off and try to do things, and then finally, it's almost like when you get an injury, you actually really have to be injured twice. You have to kind of do your thing, get hurt, and then you're like, I'm okay, we'll go work out. Oh, but they can't work out. Like it's an interesting conundrum. The mind wants to do what it wants to do because it has a rhythm, a habit, a ritual, and it almost has to be told I can't do it, which is a good thing because it keeps you motivated. It keeps you going and everything else. But this desire to not rest and work more. I was listening to the Bulletproof podcast. I haven't listened to one in a long time, but he had the guy who wrote the Sports Gene that talks about the actual genetic issues going on with people who are really good at certain sports, like runners from Kenya or
right.
um, power lifters from a certain other area. And he's saying how like the whole science, everything we've said, the future is going to be like body testing on certain things, and from there they're going to go. You're going to go to. You're going to know that you don't need to work a certain way. You're going to know that you need to. He said he took an athlete from who was working out 6 hours a day, eating right, sleeping, all that stuff, and they tested his muscles and they said, okay, you just need to work out an hour and a half a day, 4 days a week, and then this. And the guy went from like a good above average to an Olympic medalist because they tailored the program to his genetics, where it's like, okay, who was it? They had a guy, it was like a football player that he just didn't need to work out as much. He could do less. He could just do with less. He
Right.
was that way hormonally, genetically, and anything he did more was actually taking away from him. And I guarantee you that injuries are somewhat like that. Like you're testing on this extreme end of the spectrum, which is awesome because you have to do that. You're outsourcing all the bad stuff your body would do. You're just taking it out and saying, okay, buddy, heal, so it
Uh-huh.
can actually do the job that it needs to do. Um, it's interesting. It's like I said, it's a journey. You're gonna have to go through all these phases, and then you're finding out, okay, I'm hurt. This is what I needed to get unhurt. Now I'm unhurt. How do I get back to square one? Okay, this is how I'm gonna do it. It's an interesting world. It's an interesting body. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And if you ever go through this yourself, I would highly recommend like writing notes and keeping like a journal.
Logs, being
Yeah.
patient. Be very patient with yourself. Almost like you almost have to treat it like it's not your injury.
Right. And
Because we're harder on ourselves.
it's true. And you know what's funny too about it is that in all of this and thinking about all of this, I've learned this from other injuries in the past, especially more recent ones that have happened in the past 5 years. That I and you called this on me based on pure conjecture, based on the blood type book I remember like a couple of years ago, that Eat Right for Your Type book. That uh, I'm probably someone who does a lot better with less. And it was
Yeah.
interesting because I've learned this a few times from injuries now that I I end like after most recently with the ribs, after laying off everything for just a week and a half or so, and keep in mind, week and a half, I still had the rib pain, but everything else, I was in a highly trained state. I was probably pushing it a little too hard because, I was getting really into jujitsu and it was getting really into experimenting with programming too. And I was using myself as a test dummy on a lot of things. And you have to be when you're at that level of what I was doing, you have to be impeccable with your sleep and nutrition and all that stuff. And looking back on it, I know I wasn't in certain areas, and at least not to sustain that. I wasn't adapting enough. But the point being, though, is that a week and a half after, physically minus the ribs, I hadn't felt better because basically I gave myself a week and a half off and was getting 9 hours of sleep a night and was doing really well with that. And it made me think like, my personal periodization needs to probably be spread out a little bit more. That I'm not like not that I ever really was the type, but I'm not like a 5 day split bodybuilder workout kind of guy. I'm like a 2 3 day a week max workout, but make those workouts tough, but give yourself a lot of work recovery time in between.
Yeah.
And my body's always responded better to certain things like more activity oriented, so bike riding and jujitsu and hockey and things like that. Not so much, not so much like pounding at the gym, as much as my brain thinks it can do that.
And I think that you only get to that level when you have mindfulness about your body. You're like, you know what? I don't feel good bodybuilding 5 days a week. I feel really good 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. This is what he's saying. He's like, you don't need, that guy was saying, you don't need to go Monday through Friday. You need 3 days a week, 2 hours, skill acquisition, and then you're good to go. And the guy became an Olympic medalist. Like, that's top in the world, you know?
Right.
People who are doing the same thing as you. So it's a very interesting thing. And you know what? To be honest with you, ever since that uh, Steve Maxwell gave that little tidbit that I wrote down, I have it somewhere, let me find it. He just said, people with bad nervous systems are good endurance runners. They're good at endurance. They suck at putting body weight on. They're not good. People like muscle. People with good, excellent nervous systems, they're the buff guys. And I think about that all the time when I'm watching athletes on there. I'm thinking about that. When I'm at the gym, I'm thinking about that. People that are good at certain things and not certain things. It all goes down to the nervous system. It's going to be a very, very interesting.
Do you
Once
think
I find research, I want to find where he's researching that, because I
Well,
don't.
I
It's just
don't like the characterization of good and bad nervous systems. They're just different. You know what I mean?
well, the way he phrased it is inefficient. So
Yeah, that's a little bit.
you can sugarcoat it any way you want. I'm gonna say
But
it.
even in a fit, but even that's interesting though, because
I'm thinking in terms of survival, dude. I'm thinking in terms of survival. The strong, bigger, alpha male type dudes are the guys with the bad, with the efficient nervous systems, and they're the ones that, when it comes down to certain things, they'll survive. The other ones are a little bit. They're not weak or anything. I'm just saying they're. I'm sticking to a totally primal. I don't like away from the gym and lifting weights and getting big. Like, I'm thinking in terms of survivalism.
I'm gonna disagree with you there to a slight degree because
Go ahead.
the human adaptation is the ability to marathon, is the ability to track and stalk your prey. So I think the big alpha male, as long as he has the ability to continue to track and catch up and maintain the trail of a deer or whatever it is you're hunting, that
Well,
lends itself more to the type 1 dominant people.
type. Yeah, but I want to. Then I need studies on how many hunting groups are there and where do they live and all that stuff. And I guess I'm using broad strokes when I use it,
But
because
I get where you're coming
yeah,
from too, though.
his quote was, people with efficient nervous systems can produce more power.
Yeah.
The ones that are going to be type 2, like type 2 fibers. People with inefficient nervous systems are really good at endurance. And
Right.
I've been trying to find research, and would love to hear. I should tweet him just to see what he says.
I think I don't think the converse is true of that statement. I think people who are big and strong and good at pushing a lot of weight, that type of body, the type 2 dominance, I believe that they are more efficient, but I don't, or they are incredibly efficient, but I don't think the converse is true. I don't think you're inefficient. I think that it's kind of genetics dictating that you just had a draw of the cards with being more type 1 dominant.
A weight is a weight. You can both train yourselves to pick up that weight. If somebody can pick it up and do less reps and be bigger and stronger than you in terms of physicality, look, whatever you want to call it. And I know, and it's obviously a very specific example, but it's true. Some people have more androgens in their system, and they don't have to work out as much, and they look a little bit better, physically. I'm not saying us. I'm just saying in general.
Right.
So I need to do more research on my end to find what his sources were, or maybe he's just using it from years of. It's fine, but I've been thinking about that every single time, all day long, about when I'm watching NFL, or when I'm watching somebody at the gym, when I'm watching other people at the gym, women work out. Like, I'm thinking about these things as I see them going on, and I can see examples of it every single time. People who aren't good at movements, like, you can tell them, you can instruct them and everything, and to the condition where, like, wow, I can see that your nervous system, like, can't even handle it. It's all over the place,
Yeah, that's like when you get a new client and you're telling them to do like bird dogs or
Yeah.
something.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you're like out of it. So it's something that you can play around with, and it's good knowledge because I know that my nervous system is X, Y, Z, so I take care of all the variables: sleep, water, hydration, nutrition, etc. And then when I do work out, I get more results from that because I'm essentially, letting my nervous system chill out. Before, like, remember when we first met, I'm always really big on Relora and all that stuff to kind of relax the nervous system and get your digestion better. And it worked for a while. It helped me out a lot. Kind of started me on my path of like, okay, if I can do this on this, then I can probably do it myself. Okay, what can I do with it? How do I simulate this with food, etc., etc. And that was basically the same thing. I was saying, okay, if I can relax my nervous system through an herb that's natural, then I can figure out a way to, if I meditate, maybe I can do it on my own, starting on that path of letting the nervous system not be on fire all the time.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing, but that's pretty much it. That's a long project.
Yeah,
Um,
no, but I mean it's kind of in the spirit of where we're going today, and
yeah, true, very much so.
a lot of what we do is experimentation, and a lot of
A lot of what we do is gambling, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it's literally, okay, as your trainer, I'm gonna program for you. I think this is what's gonna happen, and this has happened statistically with other people, but this something else could also happen. From one extreme would be an injury, another extreme would be, wow, your body type is really, really, you can get really buff really fast, and I didn't realize that, but I didn't know because you never worked out. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of variables that you're coming up with. You're just hoping to be with somebody that doesn't hurt you and that gives you the look that you want to have.
right, definitely. And you know, a lot of that comes from too the fact that the field of exercise science and whatnot is a lot of people, and this has kind of been in the ethos for me, or the ether lately, is more of the idea that exercise science, there's only been so many studies done on it, and the studies that a lot of people cite to draw conclusions, some of them are old or very irrelevant to certain uh,
What?
to the applicability of what you'd want to do. So I think that, and this is of course my opinion. I'm not speaking for you, but I don't know if you agree that there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's also really hard to quantify a lot of these things. Like, people have a very difficult time quantifying these things, and a lot of the more brilliant scientific minds don't really end up in exercise science in terms of like these masters of data collection and these masters of analysis. So, it doesn't always get a lot of attention, and that's why Froy and I have talked about bro science a lot. If you listen to that Mike Dolce, Joe Rogan, they're talking about bro science. I think that's where a lot of it comes from, and it's kind of in that spirit that people like Froy and I start trying things, and it's kind of in that spirit where it's less about I don't know if there's not really necessarily like a code of ethics involved. I mean, other than of course wanting to do no harm, but or do the least harm. But a lot of it comes from just trying to experiment and figure out how this might work. And it goes back to the gambling analogy.
And I think I hate the term bro science. I hate it, but I understand why they use it.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
Thrown out. I think it's thrown out too much in terms of that, and I think it's like, I'm sorry, I keep saying like today. It feels
Derp.
it feels as though it's too much. I feel when people say it, they're like, okay, this is bullshit. You're full of shit.
Right.
Bro science, stamp it like a meme, bang. And I'm like, okay, but I think what most people mean to say is like, ah, jeez, everything. It's all about belief. So if you meet somebody, the shittiest trainers get results because they've convinced their clients that this is something that works. I've seen it happen millions of times, etc., etc. So just like you and I are trainers that we actually have to
That's a
convince.
weird statement.
I've seen it 1,000 times where they
Yeah,
put
I
them
mean,
through the death camp model of, okay, reduce calories, work out. Okay, you're skinny now.
hmm
That's not necessarily health.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
So, but everybody buys into it, and there's no convincing. Whereas you and I have I don't know about you, but we've had some failures. I've had some failures where I tried to explain to them, here's the program, here's long-term health and and longevity, and living longer and
Right.
doing everything right. And it takes like just 10 sessions to get them on the path, and then they quit. So they don't get the results they wanted. Not that they would get them in 10 sessions anyways, but
Right.
the re-education that goes on, a little bit of bro science, a lot of real science, a lot of new age science, and I hate that term because it sounds like it's fake, but there's a lot of new age stuff. If you're a comprehensive machine, Paul Chek is considered new age-ish just because of the stress buckets. He takes into account mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual in terms of the gym, something I'm putting in quotations.
Right.
Whereas the gym people are only concerned with physical, 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 physical. And just because he adds the mental, emotional, and spiritual, people are your new agey bro. It's not bro science, but your new agey, shaman stuff. Like get out of here with that stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So
I
I kind of understand what you're saying, but it's just a matter of opening your mind, trying something new, understanding that what you're doing is a journey for your body, and that hey, this might not work.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I are saying the same thing. It's just semantics.
Yeah, I agree. I know what you're saying. It's just a matter of I
Yeah.
just learned bro science.
No, no. Well, to me, I don't like the way people use it because to me, the term is
I think it's derogatory.
what's that?
Derogatory.
Yeah, it's derogatory and it's applied to more of like when you're on a forum of people who have no education whatsoever and things and they're like, "Bro, you got to eat 30 minutes after a workout or your protein's going to eat your muscles," you know? Like that statement made no sense. Like that's bro science to me. But to me it's not necessarily bro science to say like some people have called something like lean gains bro science. I don't consider that bro science. I consider that a guy trying to experiment in the vein that you and I did.
Studies, right?
What's that?
He's not super study heavy, that guy, right?
No, and that's what I mean. A lot of guys who invent a lot of these protocols, they're not necessarily very study heavy and they rely on very simple science. And it goes back to what I was saying before. It's simple science that, although proven, it hasn't been widely applied and then studied. So, these guys, for all intents and purposes, are those studies. It's just a shame that we're not all master data collectors and scientific study runners. You know what I mean? Because in essence, the guy who came up with the lean gains protocol, that's a beautiful experiment to testing out things.
I'm thinking, I read it. His is mostly, I did this for myself and I've done this for my clients, was his science.
Right. But that's but you see where I'm coming from though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't have a problem with that. I'm agreeing with you because
Yeah, yeah.
I like his, like, I did this for myself, I tested on myself, and then I tested it with clients.
Right.
To me, that's a study. It's just not as controlled.
Exactly.
It just doesn't have this big label on it where it's like controlled work. But again, like we said, the gambling aspect of it is, okay, somebody might die from that. Like, hey, I didn't eat this morning, something else was going on, these other variables, it just works. And I think, like we talked about before, and the reason why we brought up the subject along the same lines is supplementation.
Right.
That this is, Mark and I are working on a project, and that project requires us to give people different ways to think about health. Because of that, we have to use supplements, not the stuff you're thinking about, but we're talking about more bulletproof type cleansing, detox slash, what's the word the guy used? What's the word Dolce used? Not optimization or longer life, longevity.
Longevity, yeah. That's probably what you're thinking of.
Yeah, we're using more of longevity instead of performance-based stuff.
Right.
And we have to be very careful with what we choose. And even though we're being very careful, there's that 1% of somebody that could take something that is not right for them and causes certain things. So with that in mind, just because it's a supplement and it's something in a pill, it's definitely scarier and more intense and this other stuff. And I think there's a lot of things that I've tried and some people haven't tried, but I don't think there's any. I don't think I've ever taken anything that's gotten me sick, and I'm like, whoa, I'm never gonna do that again. I may have played around with the brain stuff a little bit too much, um, and the only thing I would get would be a hangover in terms of like, well, my brain's not on fire today. I got that stuff's not. That stuff worked really well, but there's a there's no biological free lunch like Mark used to say all the time.
Yeah, I'm. I mean, I like to be devil's advocate there and be like, you. Some might consider you lucky that you never took anything that damaged you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm trying to think the crazy like. To me, I think that C4, the pre-workout, that crazy pre-workout, is worse than anything I could have probably thought to take.
Right. Yeah, it's always kind of crazy. I mean, you have to assume, and it's bad to assume because you know the old saying, you have to assume though that these supplement companies, although unregulated, would not necessarily um, put out a product that they know would do a lot of harm because obviously they don't want to be sued. They don't want to go out of business. They're operating for profit, but that's not necessarily a risk you can always take. So, that's why you should research a lot of this stuff before you do it. And
What
a
was
lot of the research that's
N-acetylcysteine can cause a side. N-acetylcysteine is a really strong antioxidant, right?
yeah, it's N-acetylcysteine is a by definition an acetylated amino acid and the precursor of glutathione, another potent antioxidant that prevents free radical damage from toxic exposures. That's from Mercola. That's the definition.
Mercola.
Yeah. So anyway, this Freud and I kind of thought of this topic and thought it was worth podcasting on because I was doing a lot of research with healing from my injury, and there's there's not a lot of people who talk about how to heal rib injuries because really the best prescription is just rest. But there was this one doctor who wrote this blog article, and he said, these are all conjectures, but not necessarily unproven. They're just unproven, but they're not necessarily bullshit. But he was listing a bunch of possible, supplement combinations, things you might want to try that might help you heal faster. And one of them was pairing N-acetylcysteine with vitamin C, which is a common pairing in lots of different recommendations for taking it.
Yeah, it's that strong antioxidant.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the intricate science of it, but
Bro science, brah.
bro science, brah. Anyway, hashtag. Anyway, I was so I was researching N-acetylcysteine after that and was trying to figure out like, well, why exactly would it help here, or would it even be applicable? Because, although I don't have a degree in science, I do know enough about the building blocks of our body, like the difference between an amino acid, or a better example would be an adrenal hormone versus an anabolic hormone, or these types of things. Like I do know these things, so and usually I can make an informed enough decision on like certain scholarly articles to at least sort of understand what they're talking about. And this one study came up, and it was titled "N-acetylcysteine. This common antioxidant supplement could cause you loads of trouble." A great headline there. Anyway, and the quote from this article was, and researchers at the University of Virginia Health System have discovered a troubling side effect of N-acetylcysteine, a common antioxidant used in nutritional and bodybuilding supplements. N-acetylcysteine can form a red blood cell derived molecule called nitrosothiol that fools your body into thinking there's an oxygen shortage, which can lead to pulmonary arterial, I can never say that word. Your arteries,
Sure.
arterial, yeah, hypertension. That's not good. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's also known as PAH, pulmonary arterial hypertension. PAH is a serious condition where the arteries in the lungs narrow, increasing blood pressure in your lungs, causing the right side of your heart to swell. And lead researcher Ben Gaston noted that this is an entirely new understanding of how oxygen is sensed by the body. And as it turns out, your body responds to nitrosoleos, which are created when a decreased amount of oxygen is carried by red blood cells, not the amount of oxygen dissolved in the blood. And so far, the study's only been performed on mice, but the next step is to determine the threshold at which the antioxidant becomes detrimental to heart and lung function in humans.
Huh.
So that is a new understanding of antioxidants and goes along with some things Rhonda Patrick and other more forward-thinking scientists have talked about lately, that this marketing of antioxidants and oxidization in the body being a terrible thing, it's you can go overboard in it, and this study supports that.
It's a very interesting. There was a on the pod bulletproof guy. He was saying, well, the guy was pretty much saying there's genetic limitations. People have genetic limitations on certain things. He's like, no matter what I did, there was no way I was going to be good as these Kenyan runners
Mm-hmm.
on a genetic DNA level. And then Asprey's like, well, why can't you just hook them up to this one machine and create more fibers, through this? And he's like, there was one study, and the guy goes, yeah, but that study was done on rats, and rats have a different certain. He called them out on it, and it was actually kind of cool. Asprey took it pretty well. But yeah, there's to relate it to what you were saying. It's like there's that 1% chance that you could take something that it does that. It's almost it's bro science, and this statement is total bro science, but
Bro science.
everybody's different, so there's a percentage of people, regardless of whether there's a study that says this or not, regardless of whether there's this really cultured, high-level, in-depth study or not, there's always the variable. There's always the 1% that it killed or it does, and the one factor it didn't take into account, even if you study it really, really hard.
Right.
So bro science on the other end goes, yeah, you got to eat half hour right after your workout, but it's going to make you fat, like whatever. And so Asprey was talking about how he's like, yeah, I used to work out. I cut my calories down to 1,800. I used to work out twice a day, 6 times a week. He's like, and I gained weight. He's like, I didn't start losing weight until I changed my diet and worked out less. And so it kind of ties all into the fact that, yes, you can go to WebMD and find everything once somebody tells you to do something and look at all the side effects, but that doesn't, two things, and it's the opposite. Yes, you could be the 1% that follows everything on that side effects, or you could be the 1% where it doesn't do anything, or you could be the 1% that you get awesome benefits from it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only going to know if you do your due diligence, make sure you're not doing something that's actually going to harm you, and go from there. And then, so it's just as definitive as whether you had the test or not had the test. I don't know. I hope that made sense.
No, it did. It made sense. I mean, that's definitely. I mean, that's a sensible way to look at it. I mean, at the end of the day, too, the other question you should ask yourself on top of it is really, do I really need to be using X supplement or X pill or Y? It goes back to the mindfulness thing. Like
Yeah.
it goes back to our performance enhancing podcast. Like, am I putting myself at risk? What kind of risk am I potentially putting myself, up for? And
It also goes to that one article we talked about where the dark side of meditation.
Right. I don't know. Do we ever talk? I don't know if we ever talked about that on the podcast.
We talked about it, yeah. We didn't make a whole podcast about it, but we talked about it where people meditated too much and started seeing visions, and it got really dark. And I'm like, okay, we gotta stop that right there.
Yeah, I mean, really what that is, and I think I remember I said that in an email to you, and you were just like, yeah, exactly. I said something like, yeah, that's because they've never done anything introspective in their life before, and they were so scared at what they saw, and then it was just like, they like shit got really real for a second for them, and then they couldn't take it.
That's bro comment.
Yeah, it got real, bro. Hashtag bro science.
Yeah, it's weird. It's and again, I'm not saying foolishly go out and try C4.
No.
And casein, double whey post workout if you're lactose intolerant. I'm saying if you know you're lactose intolerant or you're a high anxiety person, yeah, it's not even on the docket for you to do pre-workout. It's not even on the docket for you to do whey. Those things aren't even on the docket. What I'm saying is, to truly achieve full health, you're going to have to get to a baseline of mindfulness with your body then try those things. It's not those things specifically. If you know they damage you, they damage you. But then you like, oh, I want to try N-acetylcysteine. But again, these are all external things that you're putting into your body. So again, like Mark said, maybe you don't need another meal. Maybe some bone broth will do you really good. You know?
Right. Or it's like you are me and have a rib injury and you're trying to heal it faster, but you know if you just sit your ass down for 8 weeks, it'll heal.
Yeah, that's
That's
tough.
that's different than if you had cancer and someone said N-acetylcysteine will help you, but there's this risk that your heart might fill up with blood on the right side, like and choke out your lungs or something. That made no sense. But you might risk it if you had a deadly disease. But if you could just get better in 8 weeks, you're probably just better off taking the 8 weeks off, man.
But I'm sure there's people who are allergic to vitamin D3. There's got to be somebody out there.
Or at least what the substances they make it from.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to think like all these people that live in this perfect box. Well, there's a study for this and there's a study for that, and there's study. I'm like, that's why aspirin gets a little bit too heavy at times because a lot of you shouldn't be believing things just because they're told to you. You should try things out for yourself again, as long as it's not jumping out a window to see if
Right.
you fly. I mean, I'm being reasonable. Um, but there's a lot of people who have said, "Oh, try this grounding. Is grounding bro science? I'm sorry, earthing."
Earthing, no. I think you might argue some of the methods by which earthing is advocated now might be bro science, but I don't think the science of neutrally charging something that's just basic. Um,
Yo,
what's that?
it's physics, yo.
Physics, yeah, it's just basic physics.
Yeah. What's that ICP song?
I never listened to them. You're on your own there, buddy.
They made fun about magnets. What the hell? How do you make magnets? You've never seen the SNL skit on that?
I don't think so.
I'll send it to you. It's pretty funny. They wrote a song about like the universe and it's hilarious. And they're like magnets. How the hell do magnets work? They didn't understand how magnets work. It was really weird. It was weird. SNL made fun of them. It's hilarious.
Yeah, you know, that's the interesting thing though about all of this is that you
It's
do
not it's not real until I think something's not real until you try it for yourself. If you take somebody else's word for it or somebody else's studies, then I think.
Well, I think studies and stuff are valuable because they obviously can tell you certain things that may be deniable, but then
But they do put a certain paradigm in your head where you're like, oh, here's the study.
right. But remember, the thing is, though, is that most people aren't qualified to read a lot of these scientific studies, so they have no idea of how to apply it to things. It's like, how many times have we seen the Huffington Post just completely butcher an article about some type of very fringy health thing that they're like, oh, like Vibram shoes must be bullshit because this lady hurt her ankle. Like,
The perfect example. You hit it right there. The Vibram scenario. That's perfect. There's a study that says this will just. It was a firestorm when it first came out, and then they finally got their foothold because where did they mess up? They messed up by saying Nike never ever 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 says you're gonna lose weight with these shoes, or Nike ever says you're gonna be able to dunk with these shoes. They never say it. They use imagery,
right.
right? Michael Jordan. They use Kevin Durant. They use LeBron James. Everything is kind of spoken around it, but they never say, "Hey, you're gonna lose weight if you buy this Fit Band." They never say it. So Vibram created a very pure, simple product, and because they chose the wrong language to use, somebody took advantage of the situation. And I really want to know how good the lawyer for the other people was that said, "Okay, did you foam roll? Did you do that, or was that all even null and void?" You know?
Right. I mean, it just depends. I mean,
'Cause if you think about it, let's say you buy these shoes and whoever bought them, they got a little bit hurt. Then they like we said, every injury is a little bit of a journey. She went to a trainer or somebody that said, "Oh, okay, technically yes, I can see how the shoes might have caused this, but you have really tight glutes." Full-on assessment and said, "Wow, any shoes that you would use, you'd eventually get hurt." And this just made it worse in quotations because you don't have that masking of padding. So in a way, if the person went that route, and then got better after the injury, then yes, those shoes did make you healthier. You know?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
just
know.
think, I mean, it's shitty marketing to, in the end, like you said, the mistake they made is that, these shoes will make you stronger or something, whatever.
It did everything. It did all those things. My feet, when I wear the toe, and you too. My feet
Yeah.
are like super mad monkey strong, dude.
And you get monkey strong.
Literally, I could pick things up with my feet. You become like Spider-Man on rocks. You're like, oh, okay, gotta
Gets
go.
rid of hip problems. Like there's so many good things that comes from them, but at the end of the day, like it's tough when you make health claims as a for-profit company that sells a product.
It's it
It's tough.
was an interesting deal, but that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. There's studies either way.
Right. But my point is more people don't know how to apply the studies. Like Rhonda Patrick made that point before that a lot of times like people will like Asprey's been guilty of it before too, like not understanding that there's a difference between like intravenous vitamin intake versus oral intake of vitamins and how that affects a study or how that affects a like an interpretation. And I know for a fact large news organizations have butchered that fact as well, And it's just a matter of understanding. And like you said, like, yeah, that study might apply, but it also might not for that reason of you not understanding certain things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, and
So be
that's
mindful. Yeah, tell people
yeah.
just be mindful about what you do, and I guess the best thing is, yeah, look up to see if you want to take something or you want to try something, look up, see if there's some studies on it. Uh, but get an opposing opinion as well. You know?
Well, I think you should always look up to see how acute the bad side effects could be, like how common they are and what they are. And then if you are morally and physically okay with withstanding that, like if a side effect of creatine is an upset stomach and you can't take having your tummy hurting, maybe you might not want to take it. Or if you're like, well, maybe I'll have the shits for a day, maybe
Yeah.
maybe, maybe you'd want to try it. It depends. It just depends on what you're willing to go through. And obviously look to see if that there's something very dangerous because remember the market's unregulated. But if something causes that much danger, it's usually pulled. But you have to keep an eye on it.
No, I understand it. It's a good point. It's a good topic because I think even though we weren't very definitive on this subject because it's impossibly definitive because we don't have infinite knowledge of the future and what something's going to do to somebody, you have to kind of accept that in anything you do. And that's where the mindfulness comes in. Like, oh, I read this article. I read all these articles on creatine, but no matter what it says, my stomach feels a little bit like crap. Okay, it's out. It's done. Why? It's not worth it, you know?
Right, right.
So, and again, to go back really quickly before we end on this, remember the sick fit people we're always dealing with?
Yep.
Those guys have strong, efficient nervous systems, so they can eat all that crappy food. They can take all that shitty pre-workout, all that whey because they have such a strong nervous system that supersedes all that other stuff they're doing to their body.
Right, yeah. I mean, we've known that.
Sorry, I didn't ruin that, but I had to think because I was thinking about it the other day. I'm like, oh, why are they? They're getting away. They're ripped. They're swollen. They eat McDonald's every day. They pre-work out. They do all this stuff. It's because they have such an efficient nervous system that
Yeah.
all that stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they have and eventually it breaks, but like you
Yeah,
can
but that's usually around. Eventually, to be honest with you, it does break eventually around old age. But usually, how it breaks is they passed it on half of the bad stuff onto their kids.
uh,
Yeah, that's another.
yeah,
We'll do that. We'll do another topic next week because I was thinking about it. Like all the millennials are paying the. This is for next week. All the millennials are paying the bills that their parents rang up. You know,
yeah, totally.
a lifetime of sitting in an office for 70 to 80 hours a week. The stress, the bills, the financial collapse, the everything, and the millennials are just paying the bills, and they're as a collective consciousness, they're trying to find what's good, what's healthy, what do I do with my life? They're total opposite, but their parents sat for so long in a shaded room in an office, and now the kid's autistic. I'm not saying that this is exactly what happens. I'm just saying possible scenarios.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, you're just making observations. I mean, it's true. A lot of there's that it's a good topic. It's one you and I have talked about, and I know it's on our docket of things to be discussed. But
Yeah,
you
we can
know,
talk touch base. Little teaser for next week, as they say.
yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see it too with the way people have these like hunched thoracic spines and forward heads. It's almost like it's the next stage of evolution. So many people
Rounded shoulders, dude. Rounded shoulders.
so many people my age have it. There's a guy, an editor I work with, who is convinced that like he can't figure out where his shoulder pain's coming from, and I'm always telling him, and I've given him like so many prescriptions of just how you would fix that.
Where's his shoulder pain? Up from the
It's like the medial part, and that
literally out, right?
yeah, and the
Not
medial.
the trap to the
No,
shoulder.
no, no. It's the medial delt, and when you have medial delt problems, remember the a lot of those issues go back to the attachment on the scapula. So, like I said to him, I want you to lay on the lacrosse ball surrounding your scapula every day, and do it for a few months, and eventually you'll lean up. And also, too, he has the complete hunched back, and he's still convinced that that has nothing to do with the fact that he has shoulder pain. And I'm like, all right, man.
Show him Google thoracic outlet syndrome and breathing. He's probably not breathing right either, right?
Oh, of course not. But he did do the lacrosse ball for a few weeks and felt pain relief, like some, and he started to believe what I said. But he's not. He's one of those people not willing to.
Probably sleeps on that side all night with a pillow that's too low. That's like usually the basic on it. Like the pillow that's too low on the. So he's basically sleeping. He's using his shoulder as a pillow for his body, and it's just this crazy intense amount of pressure he's putting on his shoulder.
Yeah, I've done that in the past.
I do that now. Now I double up, and I've had a problem because it was starting to affect my workouts, especially bench press, because
Yeah.
my scapular muscles wanted to fire first on a heavy load, and so they were firing before my chest. And it only happens when I sleep on my shoulder in a bad position.
Yeah, it's so bizarre when your lats and your back muscles fire in a bench press, like in a pushing motion. It's like, whoa, that's crazy.
Oh, I'm talking about my shoulder muscles, like my
Oh,
little
okay.
my the small muscles were attaching to the shoulder, and the front one was firing first, and I was like, oh, before. So the front one was lifting like 60 pounds before my pec would get involved, and I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah, that's how people end up hurting those front delts because they're doing too many inclines.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. It's an interesting world, but yeah, that's for next week. But this week we let a good one go in terms of understanding, and it all goes back to mindfulness. We can just put everything on a loop: mindfulness, breathing, thinking, sleeping, all that stuff. But
But people would stop
here's what it
listening
is:
to us.
we try to give you as many examples of how everything goes back to those principles. Everything leads back to those principles.
It's true.
It's true, people. Hit us up, listen to us, email us, tell us what topics you want. Tell us what topics you want more of.
Word, son.
Email us questions. We'll do them on the air. We definitely want to be a little bit more specific based on what you want us to kind of target, or at least guide us in terms of that. We're always going to do what we want to do in terms of content, but getting your consciousness into the show is a little bit important. So hit us up.
Indeed, indeed. Well, people, take care. You know where to find us. FunctionalMeatheads.com. Search Functional Meatheads on Stitcher and iTunes. And talk to Freud at FunMeatheads on Twitter.
Twitter.
Twitter. Artie Lang's Twitter account on Twitter. But anyway, I'm stumbling over my words. It's getting too late, apparently. So anyway, have a good one, everyone. We will talk to you next week.
Watch regular show.
Watch regular show, and it's time.
Don't watch the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. And it is time for the woo off.
Woo!